providing recreational and fitness activities that result in overall good health and well-being. Welcome to Chicago at Play.
Throughout the history of Chicago, the city hosted two major World's Fairs, and both of them happened within the Chicago parks. In 1893, the World's Columbian Exposition opened in Jackson Park in Chicago, and it was just a major occurrence for the city. People came from all over the world, and the park, which had really been unfinished, transformed into this glorious white city. There were hundreds of huge, magnificent buildings, very classically designed. The parkland, sort of the spaces between them, were lush and green spaces. And then the very centerpiece of the entire composition was the wooded island. And in this case, the original landscape architect, Frederick Law Olmsted, who had designed Central Park in New York, wanted to have kind of an open space in the middle. It was kind of the 19th century version of a nature preserve. And so people would come and they'd spend the whole day looking at all of these exhibits, but then you could get a break and be on this beautiful wooded island and kind of just be away from all of the hustle and bustle of the fair. In addition to Frederick Law Olmsted, another designer who helped create the World's Columbian Exposition of 1893 was Daniel Burnham. And he went on to design many buildings in the Chicago parks, as well as a lot of architecture in Chicago and throughout the United States. The second World's Fair happened in Chicago right in the midst of the Great Depression. It really wasn't planned that way. There were people who knew that the first World's Fair was such a great success that they wanted to repeat that, so they began thinking about it in the 1920s during an era of prosperity. Many cities would have abandoned the project once they realized how bad the economy was becoming in the early 1930s, but not in Chicago. Chicago, there's such a great spirit here, and the city decided to go forward and have this amazing fair, and it was all privately financed. So it was quite an undertaking to be able to do this financially. The fair, in a lot of ways, was kind of the opposite of the first World's Fair. It was very brightly colored buildings. So if you think of the first fair as the white city, you might think of the second as the bright city. It was a great counterpoint to the way people felt at that time. It was almost as though much of Chicago was under this dark cloud, and you would come to the fair and you would just be kind of transformed into this really bright fairgrounds with real modern buildings that used a lot of new materials. You can still see remnants of both of the World's Fairs in Jackson Park. We have the Museum of Science and Industry, which was the Fine Arts Palace at the first World's Fair, and we also have the Osaka Garden, which has some elements of both of the World's Fairs. In Burnham Park, you can find the Balbo Column, which was a gift of the Italian government, and it originally stood in front of the Italian Pavilion. So I hope you'll go out to Jackson Park and Burnham Park and take a look at these remaining remnants of the World's Fair and this remarkable part of Chicago's history.